Everybody else is trying to train.
All right, Jordan. Jordan. Come on, you're done. You're done. Our brother.
Please turn your Bibles to Proverbs chapter 4.
Go, Jordan.
Let's go, Jordan.
I'm going.
Come on, Jordan.
Proverbs chapter 4.
Proverbs.
You know, I usually put a sticky note in my first scripture.
Let's go, sticky note.
Take your time.
Yeah, seeing as I'm getting out of here pretty soon, I guess I'm getting lazy. Joke. No, at around 1 p.m. today, I actually was placing membership in the Manhattan region.
Wow.
So to my knowledge, I can't think of anyone else who placed membership somewhere else and then went and was sent out of that other place later.
Yeah.
Right, so
Trailblazer.
As of right now, I'm in 2 different regions.
Yes.
Okay.
It's like double the contra, I don't know. Like, I don't know what I'm doing here.
Come on, bro.
But it was amazing. You know, like transition's always a fun time. I actually like transition. I like moving. I moved from Los Angeles, California to New Jersey in the summer of 2017.
Yep.
And everyone in my family was like, hooray, and I was just like, yeah, I'm ready to move, you know? Like, not because I didn't like California, but just because I like new things, right? I like doing new things, going to new places. So for me, this is definitely a very bittersweet time and a bittersweet moment. But for me, like, I always just kind of feel the sweetness more than the bitterness. So I'm going to miss you guys, but I'm excited. And also, like, the place that I'm moving to, I went there today, and it was like 20, 30 minutes away, so you guys can totally visit me. Not that far. Find out who really loves me, you know? Like,
We love you, Jordan.
For those of you who don't know, I was baptized on August 17th in 2014, a little over 5 years ago, in a beach town called Ventura, California. And it was like later in the day, and so California is like usually pretty warm, but it was like at night, so it was very cold. And so I definitely suffered for the cause, right? Almost got hypothermia in Southern California. Just kidding. But it was great. And it's been a roller coaster ever since, right? I spent the first half of my discipleship in California. I was baptized the year before I went into 8th grade. And so, if you can imagine that. Like, imagine 8th grade, and then just imagine yourself, like, holding on to discipleship principles at that time. Wow. Just play that one in your head.
Yeah.
But it was amazing, and I'm so thankful for the kingdom. I'm so thankful for Kids Kingdom, right, growing up, and I definitely established the principles that I needed to be able to have the maturity to make the decisions that I was able to make when I was 13.
Yeah.
And then going into 8th grade, like, although I was mature enough to be a disciple, I don't know if I was mature enough to be like a very strong disciple, so like the first year was just like struggling, right? And then the second year, struggling. And on to the 5th year, like I'm still struggling. But the fact that I'm still struggling is like a victory.
Yes.
Struggling on through. And, but I've been a disciple for 5 years, and I'm now 19 years old. So I thought, what better, like what attribute would be better for me to give to you other than my vast wisdom? I'm getting to the ripe old age where I've accumulated lots of wisdom that I desire to impart on you guys. In Proverbs chapter 4, starting in verse 6, the Bible reads, "Do not forsake wisdom, and she will protect you. Love her, and she will watch over you. Wisdom is supreme. Therefore get wisdom. Though it may cost all you have, get understanding." I want to read a couple stories to you guys.
Let's go, Jordan.
2 teachers were once applying for the same vice principal position at a local high school. One had been teaching for a total of 5 years, and the other a total of 20. Everyone expected the teacher with the greater experience to get the job, but when a decision was made, it was the person with 5 years experience who was chosen.
Okay.
The teacher with 20 years for the job complained bitterly. "I've got 20 years teaching, to her 5, he cried. I'm vastly more qualified." The school board's reply went like this: "Yes, sir, you do have 20 years teaching to her 5, but where she has 5 years experience, you have 1 year experience repeated 20 times. Simply experiencing the passage of time does not mean we have grown or learned from those things we experienced during that time.
Come on, bro.
I want to read another story. A young man once stood on a street corner and opened his coat, and he cried, "Look at my heart! Look at my perfect, perfect heart." A crowd soon gathered, impressed by his perfect heart. They stood in awe of a heart without blemish, perfect and complete in every way. Soon an old man walked by and paused to see what the commotion was all about. When he heard the young man proudly crying, "Look at my perfect heart," the old man pushed his way to the front to get a closer look. And when he saw the young man's heart, he scolded him. "Son, that's not a perfect heart. If you want to see a perfect heart, you need to see mine." With that, the old man opened his coat to reveal an old, knotted, and ugly heart. It was full of bumps and holes, and pieces of it were broken off here and there. The crowd began to laugh, but the old man raised his hand and began to speak. And he said, "See this bump? That is when I met my first love. Oh, how the sun shone that day! How the bright colors of the universe, how sweet the swinging of the birds in the trees. Oh, what a wonderful moment it was. Ah, but you see this hole? That was when my first love broke my heart and left me. The hole once ran much deeper, but time has since filled it back up. Do you see this bump? That is when I met the woman who became my life partner. Oh, what a wonderful life we had. Year after year, we shared companionship of laughter, tears, and joy. This scar here is when she passed." The old man went on to describe many other bumps and holes and scratches on his heart. And when he finished, the crowd was silent. "You see, son," he said, turning to the young man with the unblemished heart, "yours is not a perfect heart, for it has not lived. It has not been touched with joy and tears, and laughter and love, and pain and anguish and hardship and celebration. Only when you are an old man like me will you be able to look upon a gnarled and battered heart and be able to say, yes, now that is a perfect heart."
Wow.
Let's go, old man.
The title lesson is Wisdom Beyond Your Years.
Come on.
Right.
You know, in Proverbs chapter 4, the word wisdom, the Hebrew word for it is, I wrote it down because it's a Hebrew word, hakma. The word hakma, right? So this is going to be an interesting lesson. It's a little unorthodox. I have no points. I'm really just going to kind of explore a concept, and we're going to kind of weave through it, and then I'm also going to make it like, hey, this is my farewell lesson as well at the same time. And ideally, we maintain some kind of coherence during the process. So the Bible, I love the Bible. The Bible is beautiful as a narrative. Like the Bible can really only be understood when you read it in its entirety, right? Like if you just open it up and read the book of Numbers, you might be like, wow, this is very boring, or I hate this, right? But if you just open it up and read the book of Matthew, you might be like, wow, it's like a great story, but I don't understand the context of what's going on. But when you read the Bible in its entirety, you're able to see the perfection of it, right?
Right.
And the Bible can be categorized a lot of different ways, right? Like we like to do Old Testament, New Testament, right? And then we can break it down more. You look at the Gospels, right? This is the account of Jesus. And then after that, you have the directives. And then in the Old Testament, you have the major prophets, the minor prophets, the Torah, all these different things, right? Mm-hmm. Today we're going to look at what is known as the wisdom literature. The wisdom literature is the contents are 3 books: Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job. And they all build on each other, right? So in the order of the books of the Bible that we have, right, the canon that we have, the order would be Job, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes. But when you look at the wisdom literature as one piece, it should be in a different order. It's Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job. And they all discuss what God's wisdom is, and what our wisdom should be, and what wisdom is, right? Like, wisdom is a cool word. We, like, kind of, like, assign it to old people, right? Like,
yes.
Hey, he's probably wise. Like,
Surely
great
not.
equals wisdom, right? But then you see, a young person who kind of seems like they have their head on their shoulders. They say, wow, he's wise beyond his years, right? But what does it mean to be wise? What is wisdom?
Come on, bro.
Tell us.
In the book of Proverbs, wisdom in chapters 1 through 9 is sort of explained as this great, like, attribute of God, right? Like, wisdom is something that God has, and then it's personified in the book of Proverbs as Lady Wisdom, right? And Lady Wisdom she's this woman, this entity that is like trying to express what she knows to anyone who wants it, right? And then people are able to use wisdom to build the life that they want, right? Like the theme of Proverbs is like, hey, if you, like, the wise will be successful and the foolish will not be, right? And that thing is like phrased in a lot of different ways, right? Like, hey, like, success to the wise, you know, not success to the folly, right? And that is what Proverbs is all about. The word wisdom in Hebrew, hakma, it's interesting because hakma isn't just a word for intellectual understanding or knowledge or discernment. The word hakma is also used to describe like a skilled artisan, right? Or someone who excels at their craft. And so what the Bible is teaching us is that wisdom, although yes, it is an attribute of God, it is a thing that like exists in a plane that we cannot fully like grasp, like it's not physical. But wisdom is something that can be harnessed, it's something that you can develop and learn to do, right? It's something that you can be skilled in, right? And so I want to express to you guys something that I believe I've gotten very skilled in over my time in New Jersey.
Come on, bro.
I think that I've developed an expertise in this. Malcolm Gladwell writes that it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert in something. And I think I've dedicated far more than 10,000 hours to this craft. I would like to share with you my expertise on failure. Please turn your Bible to Psalm chapter 73.
Come on. I love you, this, bro.
As I depart, I would like to impart the wisdom I have on you. Although my wisdom is limited in many areas, I thrive in the area of failure. Right, yeah, and I'm glad that people can relate, right? In Psalm chapter 73, verse 26, the Bible reads, "My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever." My heart and my flesh have failed. Like the amount of times that I can say that my flesh and heart have failed are countless, right? And yet, what does it mean to fail? What is our definition of failure? I think that what we think it means to have a failing heart is a little bit misconstrued. Please turn your Bibles to Matthew chapter 9.
Come on.
Come on, bro.
Come on, bro.
What is failure? What is wisdom?
Can you say that again if you want?
Chapter 9. And we're going to begin in verse 36.
Come on, bro.
Take your time.
Let's go, Jordan.
Come on, bro.
Although my heart and my flesh may fail me. In Matthew chapter 9, starting in verse 36, this is about Jesus. It says, "When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them, because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, 'The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest fields.'" Jesus had a very interesting response to just a crowd of people, right? Like, I'm looking at a crowd of people right now. And yet Jesus, literally just seeing crowds, it says that he had compassion on them. And he saw them to be harassed and helpless. The word compassion is what I want to focus on here. Compassion is something that's like not always registered, right? Like when are times that we can feel like compassion? It's when we see someone in like really just bad moments, right? Then our heart can really go out to them. Is that a feeling that we really desire? Is that like a feeling that we like, right? Like when the commercial comes on with like the dogs, they want you to donate like $0.25 a month, right? Like, in the arms of, like that commercial comes on. Like, I don't like watching that commercial, right? I don't think anyone does, because it provokes this feeling of compassion inside of you, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times like we think like, yeah, compassion's good, and yet I know for me, I run away from the feeling of compassion. You see, a lot of times people feel like, hey, okay, so what does it mean for your heart to fail, right? People can feel like my heart hurts. My heart is hurting. My heart is in a bad place, right? Like when you give your heart to someone and they just kind of squander it, how does that feel? When you feel compassion on someone and then you go the extra mile for them and then they show no appreciation, how does that feel?
It hurts.
It hurts. It feels terrible. And that's a lot of times what we equate to it. My heart has failed. I tried, I gave my heart, and it wasn't able to, like, the task that I set my heart to wasn't accomplished, therefore it was a failure.
Yeah.
And yet, your heart was never given to you to accomplish tasks.
Come on, bro.
If your heart is hurting, that means your heart is working. Your heart has only failed if you're not feeling anymore, right? Like your heart is what feels. Like your head is what thinks, but your heart is what feels, right? You have your psyche and your cardia. And your cardia is supposed to be like, it's like your receptor for emotion, right? And a lot of times, like we want to give our heart, but because of our experiences, because of the times that we gave our heart and it didn't turn out the way we hoped it would, or it wasn't ideal, or we really just got completely crushed, we feel like, okay, I can't give my heart again, because then it will hurt.
Right.
And if my heart hurts, that means my heart is failing.
Yeah.
But a hurting heart is a healthy heart.
Come on, bro.
It's so much easier to withhold your heart. or harden it so that you don't have to feel, right? Jesus looked at the crowds. He could have seen what I honestly see all the time. People.
Come on.
And yet instead of just seeing people, he saw those who were harassed and helpless.
Yeah.
Jesus felt that same pain and still gave you everything that he had.
Right.
I think about my life. I think about the sacrifice that Jesus has made for me and what I've done with it. The countless times that Jesus must have felt like he just gave me everything and then I just walked away.
Yeah.
The amount of times that Jesus tried to pour his heart out into me and I just decided it wasn't for me yet. It wasn't a convenient time. It wasn't comfortable. Maybe I'll come back later. And yet Jesus continues to work in my life over and over again.
Yeah. Right, bro.
Being in New Jersey has helped me to redefine what failure is.
Come on, Jordan.
If you invite someone to church, and then they come to church, and then they study the Bible, and you're studying the Bible with them, and you get all the way up until the end, and then they decide to spit in your face and never talk to you again, that's not a failure. If you go the extra mile and drive an hour to pick up someone for church, and you bring them out, and it was all for nothing or it was all in vain, that's not failure,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
If you really try your best, if you sell like everything you have to try to get that push for missions and you still come up short,
Yep.
we think to ourselves, that's a failure. What else can it be? I had a goal, I didn't accomplish it, I failed.
Come on, bro.
And yet, we have to understand that that's not what the Bible says failure is. In Psalm chapter 73, it says, yeah, like your heart and your flesh are going to fail you, but if God is still your stronghold, if God is still your everything, then you haven't failed. I want you guys to consider what you're failing in today. And then reconsider, like, are you actually failing? Or are you just hurting? Because if you're hurting, then your heart's working. Now, if you're not feeling anything, if you feel it's completely comfortable and you're like, I'm fine right now, I've been good for years, then maybe your heart has failed you. Maybe it's time to get your heart working again.
Come on.
I want to challenge you guys. Consider and write down your greatest heart failure ever.
Come on.
The moment where you just completely withdrew your heart. Not the time that you gave your heart and it was all for nothing or it hurt, but the time that you just said, not this time. I can't give my heart this time. I can't do it again. And I want to challenge you guys to choose to give your heart to something that's hard to give it to this week. Think about something that you know you just don't want to give your heart to. It could be a person. It could be like a goal, right? It could be like this dream you used to have but kind of forgot about it. But it's in the back of your mind. You don't want to pursue it because you know if you do, it'll hurt you if you fail. And I want you to pursue that this week. Because if you put your heart out there and you fail, if God is still your stronghold, you didn't really fail. All you've done is plant a seed. And we're going to learn more about what that actually means.
Come on, bro.
Please turn with me to Ecclesiastes chapter 1.
Come on, bro.
It kind of like wraps up in the end, you know, like that might not be like the most encouraging thing to hear. But
Great job, bro.
we're going somewhere. We're
Come on,
going
bro.
somewhere.
Feeling good, bro.
Ecclesiastes chapter 1. The book of Proverbs was written by Solomon. And Proverbs is like an incredibly optimistic book, right? It's like, hey, if you do the right thing, you get the right outcome. Like every single time without fail, right? Like really Proverbs is like a really, really encouraging book, right? It's pretty straightforward. Like it says like, hey, like if you do wrong, like expect bad things. But as far as like, hey, if you're holding to the standard, like it's incredibly encouraging, right? You read Proverbs and you're like, yeah, I get advice, like it looks like I'm good, right? Like I listen to correction, like according to this, like things should be going well for me, right? And ironically, the book after Proverbs is Ecclesiastes, which is also written by Solomon. It is probably the most depressing piece of literature on earth. And yet it's actually my favorite book. I actually think it's very beautiful. We're going to talk about it.
Come on.
Ecclesiastes chapter 1, starting verse 2.
Come on, bro.
Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless, everything is meaningless. It's a good start, right? A good start to the book. You know, this phrase, like, everything is meaningless, or life is meaningless, is used over 40 times in a book with, like, 13 chapters. He just keeps throwing it in there, like, yeah, your life's meaningless, everything is meaningless, right? The word meaningless here, in Hebrew, is the word hevel. And I believe that the biblical translators have kind of lost the metaphor here. The word hevel, like, literally translated in the Hebrew, is closer to the word smoke, or vapor. And life is kind of like smoke in that it can be elusive, it can be deceiving, it can be disorienting, and very unclear if you're in the midst of it.
Right.
So I believe it's not that life has no meaning, because if we work under the assumption that life literally has no meaning, then the rest of the direction Ecclesiastes has is just a straight contradiction, right? But if we work under the assumption that it's not that life has no meaning, but rather that its meaning is never clear, then we can understand what this book is trying to teach us.
Yeah, bro.
You see, why I moved to New Jersey is not clear to me. It wasn't clear to me when I got here, and it's still not clear to me now. But I think some things are a little more clear to me.
Come on.
I believe that moving to New Jersey has been a blessing that I don't understand. And yet, there have also been times where I felt like I was breathing in smoke. Please turn with me to 1 Corinthians chapter 3.
Come on, bro. Come on, bro. Stay with him.
Me too. So did Paul, he wrote them 2 letters.
Come on, bro.
1 Corinthians chapter 10.
Chapter 3. In 1 Corinthians chapter 3, starting in verse 10, the Bible reads, "By the grace God has given me, I laid a foundation as an expert builder, and someone else is building on it. But each one should be careful how he builds. For no one can lay any foundation other than the one already laid, which is Jesus Christ. If any man builds on this foundation using gold, silver, costly stones, wood, hay, or straw, his work will be shown for what it is, because the days will bring it to light. It will be revealed with fire, and the fire will test the quality of each man's work." One thing that has become clear to me since I moved to New Jersey is that when I came here, I was living on a broken foundation. My foundation was found in the book before, in Proverbs. My idea of God was like, hey, if I give God my best, God will give me his best. If I do right by God, God will do right by me. Isn't that what Matthew 6:33 says, right? If I seek first God's kingdom and his righteousness, like, what will be given to me? All these things, right? Like, I start thinking of all these things that I need. Like, sounds like if I just do my part, God will do his, and we can live in harmony, right?
Yeah.
This was my foundation. What my foundation should have been is that Jesus is my everything. That Jesus' sacrifice is my everything, and God's love for me is my everything.
Right.
If God is your everything, nothing can be taken from you.
Right.
When I moved here, I remember I was genuinely just so like my heart was golden. I was actually just so excited. I remember like I confessed like every kind of sin that I've already confessed and more before I went. And then I was like confessing my sin on the way. Because when I got there, when I got here, I just wanted to be like, I want to be on top of my game, you know? Like I want God to be able to use me like at my maximum capability, right? I want to be like the optimum vessel for God to work through, right?
Come on, bro.
And like I genuinely had a very sincere and pure heart. And I was, at that point in time, I was incredibly grateful. Because I felt like God had really blessed my life, right? I was moving. I had just started dating, which made me the youngest dating brother in the kingdom at the time. So I kind of had that on my shoulders, you know? Look at me go, you know? And I had prayed, although I loved where I lived, I had prayed to move because I felt like staying there was corrupting me spiritually. And the way that we had been kind of like, it's crazy, huh? The way that we kind of been like upheaved and just moved across the country, I was like, wow, like God is literally answering my prayer like that. Like I prayed for something and God gave me that.
Come on, bro.
And I remember a few years before I had prayed just for like better friends. I remember God gave me a best friend, just one of the strongest brotherly friendships I've ever had, and at that time the strongest brotherly friendship I had ever had, right?
Wow.
And then I was torn because I was going to leave him in California. And then days before we moved, he called me and said, "Jordan, I'm coming with you."
Wow.
And I was like, God is just taking care of me here and here and here. Everything I can ask for, God's giving me.
Come on.
It must be because I'm giving God everything I have, right? Like, guys, you guys should do what I'm doing. Like, I'm giving God everything. I'm giving Him everything. Look how God's taking care of me.
Yeah, man.
And I remember I moved here, and I was like nervous about the new basketball team I was going to join. And I got there, and on the first practice, I beat out the starting senior, and he literally quit the team. And I was like, they were like, "This is your show now."
Wow.
I was like, wow, like I prayed for God to give me success in basketball, and He gave me that, right? And then I prayed for certain classes that I wanted, and they were offered at this school, and I just felt like, wow, like I must have been doing something really good. Because God's giving me a lot right now.
Come on, bro.
Come on, Jordan.
Come on, Jordan. Come on, bro.
I remember I wanted to be in a church where people believed in me, right? And I remember Luke Speckman, the leader of the church, was like, hey, like, I believed in you. I was like, boom, there it is. Right? All I needed to hear. And then I remember around Thanksgiving time, which was like 3 months after I moved here, my best friend flew home to go visit his family for Thanksgiving, and that was the last time I ever saw him. I remember I was like, why did you leave? You know, I couldn't understand. And we've still never communicated to this day. And I later found out that he had been a sexual predator. And I never knew that. And I found out that my best friend was a monster, and he had hidden it from me. And it was like, God, like, I don't understand. Like, what did I do wrong? I've been walking in step with you. Like, I do right by you. You're supposed to do right by me. And then I remember a few months later, I got a call from my evangelist saying, like, hey, your girlfriend was immoral with one of her coworkers. You should probably break up with her. And I was like, whoa, like, she's like one of my best friends. Like, why would she do that to me? And then I remember I went to God. God, I'm giving you everything I have. Like, why have you taken 2 things from me now? Then I remember when my family was hit, and I felt like we were all falling apart. And I felt like all I had left was, like, I guess basketball. I remember, like, midway through the season, there was a play, and I came down and I hurt my leg. And then I was like, God, why are you taking everything from me? So when God started to take things from me, I decided I'm just going to work harder for you. God, you take something from me, I must have messed up at some point. Let me work harder for you. And I began to pray harder. I began to read more. I began to work harder for the church. And every time I give my heart a little bit more, God would take a little bit more away. When my best friend moved, I had made like 2 more best friends, and then they both moved. And I felt solitude. And I felt like there was no plan for my life. And so I decided that must mean that I have to give God more. Please turn with me to Ecclesiastes chapter 9.
Come on, Rob. Come on, bro. Do your work.
We're with you.
Good job. Come on, bro.
I was living on a broken foundation. In Ecclesiastes chapter 9, starting verse 11, the Bible reads, I have seen something else under the sun. The race is not to the swift, or the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise, or wealth to the brilliant, or favor to the learned, but time and chance happen to them all. Solomon is saying here, God is saying here, just because you're the strongest person doesn't mean you're going to win every fight. Just because you put in the most work to be the fastest man doesn't mean you're going to win every race. If you make all the right investments, make all the right decisions, you might still go bankrupt. And you can study as hard as you can, and you might still fail the test. Please come with me to Ecclesiastes chapter 12.
Come on, Rob.
You see, loving God doesn't necessarily equal a good life. That was my foundation. If I love God, I get a good life. If I give God my best, He'll give me His. Now, this doesn't mean things like strength and speed and love for God are meaningless. It just means they're kind of like smoke. And we can't always understand their meaning when we're in the midst of it. In Ecclesiastes chapter 12, starting in... I'm sorry.
Come on, bro.
Starting in verse 13.
Come on, bro.
It says, Now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep His commandments. For this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. In a world full and in a life full of uncertainty, you can count on one thing being worthwhile. The fear of the Lord and obeying His commands.
Right.
You see, the reason why I felt like God had taken everything from me is because God wasn't my everything to begin with. Well, my everything was like my status here, and then like my work ethic, right, and my perseverance and my faithfulness and all these different attributes that I felt like I had worked on and I had built in myself, and God was trying to teach me that, no, none of those things are things that you have. All you need is me.
Yeah.
You don't need to be so perseverant. You can be weak. In fact, I'd rather you be weak because it is in your weakness that my strength will be known.
Yeah.
You don't have to be so wise. You don't have to pretend like you're smarter than you are. It'd be better if you were dumb. Because then you'd be less confused with the concepts I'm trying to teach you. Maybe then I wouldn't have to take everything from you. But really, I took nothing from you.
Wow.
Because I was all you needed to begin with.
That's right.
Come on.
Turn with me to Job.
Come on, bro.
Go.
Job is hard to date. Job is one of the few books in the Bible that really gives you zero historical context. Literally all we know about Job is that he lived in the land of Uz, or Uz,
Yeah.
right? That's all we know. We don't know who was like the reigning king. We don't really know anything else, right? Some people say that the book of Job was written in the post-exilic period, but I don't really think that's possible because if it was, like, how was his circumstance like this, right? Like that would mean that they were like enslaved, which I don't think is possible. The other, another theory is that Moses wrote this book. It was like the sixth book that he wrote. And it was meant to be like a little bit more vague, a little bit more poetic, and we wouldn't understand that. But using like the dating like system that we use today, all the books of the Bible, like it doesn't really fit. A lot of people think that Job is actually the oldest book in the Bible. It was the first one written. Some people say it was as old as back when Mark Hare was in the campus ministry.
Wow.
When Job was written, we don't know. Please read with me in chapter 1, starting in verse 6. It says, "One day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The Lord said to Satan, 'Where have you come from?' Satan answered the Lord, 'From roaming through the earth and going back and forth on it.' Then the Lord said to Satan, 'Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil.' 'Does Job fear God for nothing?' Satan replied. 'Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face.' The Lord said to Satan, 'Very well. Everything he has is in your hands, but on the man himself do not lay a finger.'" Here we get like a pretty amazing account of heaven, right? Like, we kind of get this like sense like, okay, God is in heaven, and then all the angels come and gather, right? Almost like a heavenly staff meeting kind of, right?
Yeah.
In another translation, it says that it was not the angels, but the sons of God gathered around God, right? And the Hebrew word for God, both lowercase g and capital G, are both the word Elohim, right? Yeah. And all that means is like a being that is like spiritual, right? And not physical. And in the Hebrew time, they would be able to read that and be able to differentiate using context, like, okay, so it's like God's talking to God, or right, or servants of God, or messengers of God. But then there's a separate name here, Satan, right? Interestingly, like when you read this in like the Hebrew, like there's a prefix to this. It's not just Satan; it's the Satan, right? Satan actually has no name, but more like a title. And the Satan literally means the accuser, right? The actual definition of that word would translate more closely to the adversary, right? So Satan is not it's not an entity with a name. Satan is simply in opposition of God. He's an adversary, right?
Yeah.
And his specialty is accusations. And he makes an accusation here of Job, right? He's like, yeah, like Job is great, but have you considered that maybe the reason he's so great is because you're so great to him? And he brings back this principle that is looked at in both Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, right? If you're good to God, he'll be good to you. Until he's not, right? What is this? What is this like sort of like matrix that we've encountered here? Well, Satan, the Satan, right, the Satan is really more how to be pronounced. He accuses Job of having a false motivation, right? And then I'm not going to read through the whole book of Job because it's really just dense Hebrew poetry, right? But pretty much what happens is Satan takes God's permission and he goes and he strikes Job, right? First he kills his kids, then he kills all his like animals and his property, and Job doesn't turn against God. So Satan appeals to God. He's like, hey, I mean, yeah, I took his stuff away, but like if you let me hurt him, like then he'll curse you. And God says, I'll allow it. Do as you wish. And then he strikes Job with illness, strikes him with leprosy. Job has to watch his kids die as he watches himself die. And although he doesn't turn against God, Job is like on an emotional roller coaster.
Yeah.
And if you read it, he literally said delivers a poem cursing the day of his birth. This is the dismay that he feels, right? And then on top of that, like his 3 friends pull up and they're just like, yeah, like, I mean, a lot of bad things are happening to you, so you must have done some pretty bad stuff, Job. And Job like just defends his innocence, right? He's like, nah, I was just kind of here, and then everything just kind of fell apart. We're like, no, that's not how God works. We're on to you, Job. We know you did something, right? And Job's wife is like, yeah, they're right. Like, you should just die. Like, I mean, clearly God hates you, right? And so Job has no support. He has nothing else, right? All he has is himself and the control over his attitude to the present moment. And in Job chapter 40, we're just going to kind of skip to the end here.
Come on, bro.
Basically, Job and his friends go through 3 cycles of all his friends telling Job why he's like a sinner and why God must not like him, and Job like gives his rebuttal. This happens 3 times, right? Until a 4th friend comes and offers like a different kind of vantage point, and by this time Job has had enough, and he begins to question God. He doesn't curse God, but he demands God for an explanation. And so God grants him that. In chapter 40, verse 1, the Bible says, "The Lord said to Job, will the one who contends with the Almighty correct him? Let him who accuses God answer him." Then Job answered the Lord, "I am unworthy. How can I reply to you? I put my hand over my mouth. I spoke once, but I have no answer. Twice, but I will say no more." Then the Lord spoke to Job out of the storm. God goes on. Like at this point, I would imagine God would be like, okay, this is what happened, right? The angels came up to heaven, and Satan was there too. We made this kind of wager on how spiritual you are, right? And I feel like Job might have been like, oh, that's cool, like, good confidence in me, right? And yet, what does God do? First, he like rebukes Job, right? He says in verse 8, "Would you discredit my justice? Would you condemn me to justify yourself? Do you have an arm like God's? Can your voice thunder like his? Then adorn yourself with glory and splendor and clothe yourself in honor and majesty." He's like, you want to be God? Go ahead and be God. Like, do it. Like, we're all watching, right?
Wow.
And then in verse 15, "Look at the behemoth, which I made along with you, and which feeds on grass like an ox. What strength he has in his loins, the power in the muscles of his belly. His tail sways like a cedar, like a tree. The sinews of his thighs are close knit. His bones are tubes of bronze, his limbs like rods of iron. He ranks first among the works of God." Drop with me now to chapter 41, verse 1. "Can you pull in the Leviathan with a fish hook, or tie down his tongue with a rope?" In verse 18, he goes on to describe the Leviathan. "His snorting throws out flashes of light. His eyes are like the rays of dawn. Fire brands steam from his mouth. Sparks of fire shoot out. Smoke pours from his nostrils, as from boiling pot over a fire of reeds." And so we see here, Job in the midst of all his suffering, just literally all he wants is like, God, just please explain to me what happened, right? What did I do wrong? What did I do to deserve this? You see, the entirety of Job and his friends are working under the assumption that if I live a good life, God will return that to me.
Yeah.
And so God's response to that is, look at this incredible beast I've made. Look at this, another beast I've made. That one's on land, that one's in the sea. Look at the way my voice thunders. Think about your own perspective. Like, and from a cosmic standpoint, we are all like blips. We think like, oh, like I'm 5 years old spiritually, right? I'm 19 years old, or whatever that is for you. We think that now we have understanding, that now we have knowledge, that now we can examine our lives and decide for ourselves what we deserve. And then we look at our life and our current circumstances and say, hey, but like, what about that person? I look at this thing, and that means that that should correlate to me having this, right? And then we can sort of make these equations for ourselves, and yet Job had everything, and then suddenly he had nothing. And God's only answer to him is, look at all that I see. Look at all the things that you can't see, right? I imagine God, it says that God spoke to him through the storm. I imagine that Job kind of gets like this virtual reality tour, right? He probably sees the behemoth. He probably sees the Leviathan. He probably sees the intricacies of God. And where does that leave Job? Let's look in chapter 42, verse 1. It says, "Then Job replied to the Lord, I know that you can do all things. No plan of yours can be thwarted. You asked, who is this that obscures my counsel without knowledge? Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. You said, listen now and I will speak. I will question you, and you shall answer me. My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore, I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. All God did was give Job a glimpse of everything that he could see. All God showed him was just two things that he created. In the midst of an entire world, an entire universe that God has made. And all it took was two creations for Job to be in dust and ashes and repent. You see, this is God's wisdom. It does not matter who you are or what you do. Our perspective is limited, does not do what that is justice. God's overall encompassing understanding and knowledge, His wisdom is something that we can use to build our lives, and yet it's not something that's ever going to be able to be calculated, right? The Bible says that it transcends our understanding, right? And we have to be content with just I'm just never going to get it. All God does is invite Job to trust in his wisdom. And then after that, in verse 12, the Lord blessed the latter part of Job's life more than the first, right? And then it basically says that he just doubled everything Job had. Is it because Job passed a test, and therefore that was his reward? No, the whole point of the literature of wisdom, right, is that there is no test, there is no reward. It is just God's wisdom, and it's our role to trust in it and make out everything.
That's right.
And yet, in God's wisdom, he must have just decided to give Job a gift.
Right.
It wasn't a reward. It's not like you get this as a result of this. It's just, I'm going to decide to give you that, right?
Yeah.
And I look at my life now. I think about when I came to New Jersey, and I thought I had everything, but really all I had was a broken foundation. God stripped me of really my entire identity. Really, at one point, my will to live. And then, not because I did anything to deserve it or earn it back, God just seemed to multiply everything back into my life. God repaired my family. He's given me friends and all of you that I don't deserve. The most important lesson that I've learned from being here in New Jersey is that I cannot comprehend God's plan.
Come on, bro.
And when things don't go as I planned, it would be foolish for me to demand an explanation from God. Rather than make accusations as Satan does, it is better to acknowledge what is happening and then either ask God for help or thank Him for what's happening. There have been a lot of times where I just simply acknowledge my life and its current circumstance, and I just ask God for help. But right now, I want to acknowledge my life and its current circumstance and thank Him for it. I want to thank Him for all of you. I believe that my time in New Jersey has been a time where the Bible has truly come to life. And I've seen it in all of you. In Travis and Shivanti, I see a real life version of Priscilla and Aquila.
Come on.
I can rely on you in a way that I would rely. I'm very prideful, so I rely on myself, but I rely on you guys just as much. In times where I can't feed myself, you guys feed me.
Wow.
And I didn't even ask for it. It's like you just kind of knew I was hungry, and you guys come in that way. In Natalie, I see Peter. I see someone that's a little bit feisty, but when she stands up, people listen to what she says.
Yeah.
And I see someone with a world of potential, someone who can be trusted with keys to something important.
Amen.
In Will, I see a Timothy,
Come on.
someone who desires to give himself to a Paul, someone who desires to be trained, for someone to unlock his true potential, for someone to take the talents that you have, that you've given to the world, and that you've used for yourself, and to show you how to give it to everyone else, and more importantly, how to give it to God.
Amen.
And in Chu, I see a Solomon, right? Maybe he's not here, but Solomon probably was absent for a lot of things. In Kyla, I see Joshua. Joshua was a warrior. Joshua was the predecessor to Moses. Joshua stepped in when there was a vacancy, and Joshua led his people, battle after battle. Joshua was ruthless. Joshua did not let anything that shouldn't live, live. And he protected what mattered to him.
Come on.
In Jacqueline, I see Mary. I see someone who sits at the feet of Jesus. Someone who takes all the hassle, all the Marthas surrounding her and say, hey, you gotta do this, you gotta do that, you gotta do this, you gotta do that, what about this, what about that? And someone who just cancels out the noise and sits at the feet of Jesus. Says, teach me how to be the better version of me. Yes. In Tifa and Jamelia, I see the sons of thunder.
Oh.
Let's go.
Yes.
Reach this.
I see James and John going to the top of the mountain, heard by all,
Preaching.
preaching the truth.
That's right.
In Mark, I see a David. I see someone who's failed and failed and failed.
Amen.
And yet still, David goes down as the greatest king Israel ever had.
Come on.
He was filled with potential, and his song was able to stir the hearts of kings.
Come on.
Come on, Jordan. Let's go.
Come on, bro.
David will never be known for his downfall, but for his heart, to have a heart like God's.
Yeah.
Alyssa has been a Paul in my life. Alyssa is fierce and not sentimental, and you're everything that I need. You are the embodiment of forceful advancement in this region,
Amen.
and this region has come to life because of you.
That's right.
In my dad, I see Moses.
That's
I
right.
see someone that takes on the burdens of others,
Come on.
someone who's taken on the burden of me.
Yeah, that's right.
Go, bro. Take your time, bro. We're here for you. Take your time, bro.
I've not always been the best son. In my nature, I've always been far more concerned with developing and building my own life rather than looking after yours. And I find that all the best decisions I've ever made are because I imitated you or listened to your advice. And the biggest regrets I have, I probably could have avoided if I had listened to you.
Come on.
It's true, bro.
Come on, Jordan.
Thank you for stepping in and leading people when they needed you to.
Amen. Push through, bro.
Thank you.
Come on, Jordan.
And my mother, that's the Simon of Cyrene.
Come on.
As Jesus lifted his cross to his death, Simon of Cyrene, who was innocent of everything, a man who just happened to be there. You just happened to be my mom. And that was probably a lot more than what you would have liked to sign up for. And yet you carry my burdens time and time again. When I can't carry my own cross, and I feel the weight of it lifted, I know it's because your hand has been at play. I'm grateful for all the times that you've intervened and never mentioned that you did. For all the things you do and never expect to thank you. And in my sister Bella, I see Joe. I see someone that was given everything they could ever need. And I see someone who had all of that taken away. I wrote this lesson for you.
Come on, bro.
I want you to know that although you are loved by many, you never need for anyone to love you. Although everyone believes in you,
Right.
it's not necessary for anyone to. And although you have everything you could ever need at your disposal, none of those things are needed. But rather, I'm inviting you to trust in God's wisdom.
Amen.
I'm inviting everyone here today to trust in God's wisdom. I'm forever grateful for the time I've spent in New Jersey. I'm forever grateful for the friendships I've made here. And
Amen.
I don't expect them to end here. I hope you guys support me as I just go across the bridge. And I'll support you from there as well. I'm grateful to be a part of the beautiful piece of God's kingdom. And I really look forward to looking back and thinking about, wow, there was only like 30 people when I left. How did it get to 300 in a year?
Amen.
I have dreams for all of you individually. In each of you, I see someone in the Bible. And it's funny how the people in the Bible who are our heroes were actually pretty terrible people. They all had the worst weaknesses. Paul was a murderer and a persecutor. Job demanded explanations from God. Jesus called Peter satanic. Moses tried to convince God that he couldn't lead because he literally didn't know how to speak. And yet these are our heroes. And each of you are my heroes. I love you all. And I pray that we can all have wisdom beyond our years today.
Come on, bro.